Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 22 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. My name is Lori Beth, and this is a show that is about exploring transformation from the inside out, transformation for the sake of waking up, for the sake of freedom, for the sake of having more of who you are, more intimacy with your body, with yourself, with your life, as opposed to getting all the things of the life that you might want. That might be a natural byproduct. But in this show, I interview thought leaders, coaches, healers, therapists, all kinds of different people who are exploring transformation in all of their respective fields. So today I have the privilege of interviewing Joshua Falcon-Grey, and the topic is transformational theater. I don't see him on here, but I need to add him. Let's see if he will come on. I might have to. Thanks for hanging tight. I hope everybody's having a beautiful Tuesday. Let's see if here he is. Okay. So Joshua, I can't see how to add you. Okay, here you go. So here we, technology. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. It looks kind of funny. Does the screen kind of look funny from my end?
There's a little bit of a haze in the back, probably because you're a little bit backlit, but
Oh, okay.
you're also okay. I mean, we can see you.
Cool. Okay. It looks a little distorted for me, but as long as it works
Yeah.
for you, it's cool.
Yeah. You might want to
Hi.
come a little bit closer to the screen if you can do
Well,
that. Yeah.
sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect. Great.
All right. Cool.
Well, so welcome. So I'm really excited to be interviewing Joshua today, and I would love to just introduce you for our viewers' sake. Joshua is a filmmaker, an intuitive empath. He has many different titles: an author, a speaker, and most importantly for today's topic, he's the creator of Tao Play, which is a form of transformational theater that he created that helps those that he works with to be able to work with their unconscious, subconscious, and just challenging material, we could say, emotional material, psychological material, spiritual material, in a way that, they sort of bringing his clients into working with it as kind of as play, as theater, as kind of a movie screen, to basically develop a different relationship with the stuff that comes up for all of us. So Joshua works a lot with polarities, sort of integrating different polarities, and it seems like potentially like different archetypes, different, just whatever is actually arising in a person to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really fun and creative way that is also very embodied, that tends to allow for a lot of movement, even in one session of the work that he does. So I will let him speak way more to the work that he does. That's why he's here. And I'm just really excited to have you on the show today. And for people to learn about this your modality, but also the principles of your modality, so that they can use it in their own lives, whether they're using it with themselves or as a coach and a healer wanting to use it with their clients. So that's going to be the topic of today's interview. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. It's really an honor because I've been very struck by your work, and I
Mhm.
feel like we have a lot of similar insights and ways of working. And so, it really feels nice to, support and to be supported by
Mhm.
someone with uh, such a parallel path, really, I think.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I really sense that also with the somatic and the sort of embodiment work, that the
Yeah.
way that you're working really gets at these parts and the experiential work, to get at
Right,
things in a
right,
more
right.
experiential way rather than our normal
Hmm.
kind of thinking about it, but actually moving with it, moving through it. So, but thank you. That's very
Yeah.
kind to hear.
Yeah.
And it's been really lovely to know you and begin to kind of, learn about each other's work. So,
Yeah, likewise. Thanks.
yeah. So I'm happy to have you here. So what I would love to start out with is just if you could speak a little bit about, I mean, I think that the the first thing you may want to that might be the best to talk about would be what is transformational theater? What is it that you do? And then we can go
Hmm.
into kind of how you got to this kind of work. Mhm.
Right, right, cool. And if I have any technical hiccups, let me know and I can repeat something, if it's a
Sure,
bandwidth issue or microphone or whatever.
sure.
Um, I'm outside and the wind just picked up. That's why I thought to say that. So, what's the difference between theater and transformational theater, right? There's a lot of people who go to see plays or go to see um, movies, stories of all types, right? Comic books, even newspapers are works of semi-fiction, um, books. People are subjecting themselves to stories, TV shows, stories of all types. And for me, a transformational story is simply a story that has a couple of components. One is it really goes deeper. It is usually written or channeled by a an author who has a sense of courage to dive into themselves in the process. And so, usually in writing it, it's a healing process for the author themselves. And so that means not only is it going deep, but it also has some element of completion. It has some element of taking these, it's like opening up a bunch of threads, opening a bunch of energies within a story, and then by the end of the story, consolidating those threads into a new, um, more harmonious rope, you could say, if we're talking about threads. It's like unweaving one rope, having the whole story process, and then weaving a new rope, which is more intentional and it lacks the destructive components that were probably in the version 1.0 of that original rope. And so transformational theater can look very similar to traditional theater because a lot of traditional theater is transformational, but not necessarily. So I think that's a big component. And then for me, one of the very powerful, tender, and opportune aspects is what really sets this type of transformational theater apart. Dao play is the modality. My company is called the Quantum Theater. What really sets this apart, as far as I understand it, is because this transformational theater is spontaneous. And so it's not pre written, it's not premeditated. It is genuinely arising from what is present in me, what's present collectively on the planet, and what is present with the people that I'm talking to or present in the room with the people I'm working with. And so it's this sort of co-created, um, magically inspired characters whatever aspects of us that are present that day create a new cocktail of energy that literally the world has never seen before. And so it touches new energies, it creates new energies that have not ever been created. And it's literally pioneering new frequencies for humanity to embody just by
Mm.
uh, trusting and having faith in this collective co-creation that we do. So I hope that answers kind of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, beautiful. I mean, what I'm hearing in all of that is that, I mean, one, that theater, normal theater actually does have transformational elements, but that, in your work, you're actually specifically focusing on how do we catalyze those, like how do we catalyze the transformation, and then I hear you speaking also of this kind of that the work is not, it's about the individual, but it's also about the collective, which obviously my work is also about that. It's beautiful to hear you speak about that. What I think could be, what I'd love to hear more about is like, kind of like, who is this for, and what are the kinds of, what might somebody bring to you, and then how might you work with them around that so that we can really ground it into like, this is what it looks like for people.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. There are a few different approaches to it, and so it doesn't necessarily have it. It's been challenging for me to put it into a box and relay it because there's the one-on-one version, which is very personal for people, and for me too. I always make myself vulnerable to a healing experience myself just in that process because oftentimes if somebody has resistance in diving somewhere themselves, then it's up to me to do that dive, and one of us doing that movement, one of us surrendering to whatever the unknown is the work. It doesn't have to be them, it could be me. It doesn't have to be me, it could be them. um, and so I'll give a demonstration or a example of how this would look one-on-one. It's essentially the movie scene that that particular person's energy, emotional body, has been craving to experience. They have been craving to be in or take part in a certain scene. There's a plane going by here. I don't know if you can hear that. Oh, it's a helicopter. And so for some person, so for one person, it might be, maybe let's say, for example, it's a vegan and they've been, um, criticizing animal products for years, and they've kind of put themselves in a box because of this. They might need, as an example, an outlet where they can go hunting with me in the forest and shoot a bunch of deer willy-nilly and just have a good time releasing that way because they've been such a proponent for the opposite for so long. And so it kind of neutralizes all the shadow aspects of that particular story. And then with a group, it is similar because we usually focus on one or two people of the story of one or two people and let that represent the collective. And then everybody just gets to witness the personal transformation of someone in the group. And then a more sort of mainstream version of this is also showing up now too, which is, let's say there's some terrible tragedy happening on the planet. It could be our planet is, the planet is getting so hot that it's like all the ice is melting and it's going to turn into an emergency wasteland. And we could do a Tao play experience for the planet where we experience the planet essentially hitting rock bottom. Let's say, for example, the planet gets so hot, it's like volcanoes are going off and there's fires everywhere and all the ice is melted. And we essentially get to experience the worst case scenario. And then from that place, healing is possible. So if we are afraid of the apocalypse, then we're also actually curiously attracting the apocalypse because we're desiring to experience that darkness, and then we get to witness the aftermath of this apocalypse, and then we get to witness the repopulation and the healing of the planet. That gives us the experience that we have been fearing, so we're no longer on pins and needles of what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing in that is that, like, for somebody doing maybe individual, I mean, there's different elements that can come out. There's like working with the shadow, working with the part of yourself that maybe you are more scared of because maybe you live in, one side of a polarity. So then that can like unleash energy because you're kind of playing that movie scene out and you're playing that part that you have kind of been scared of. But then also similarly, like with larger world events, it's the same kind of thing. It's like allowing the energy that's there in the body and in our beings that gets activated when we think about these situations happening in the world or we're fearful of them, allowing ourselves to play that out so that again that potential energy just it gets to move in a new way. And then I'm guessing that people have new insights, and it's almost like shifting neural pathways in a certain way, because then things start to wire differently, or it's like, oh, I can feel a freedom in actually embodying this, actually being this. But you're taking it one step. It's not, I don't know if I'd say it's one step beyond embodiment, but it's like, it's a different way of embodying because you're also creating the story, right? So it's like you're embodying it through being a character in the movie, versus kind of being yourself, maybe in other healing kind of work and going into the body and moving the body. It's like you're actually, there's also, I imagine, I'm just getting as I'm talking, that there's also probably a lot of compassion that can come out as well, both for self and for other in the world, right? Because then you can say, oh, now I know what this would feel like to live in. I can put myself in those people's shoes and really like feel this.
Right. So yeah, that's a very important component, is how it's combining embodiment and storytelling, because not only are we embodying the darkness that we've been fearing, but we are escorting the stuck emotions into a new state, and that is alchemy, right? So my original study was in filmmaking. I learned how to be a storyteller. I became a story expert, story connoisseur. And so I got to understand that, story is very simple: beginning, middle, and end, right? Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And so what's really interesting about that is this is also the way that trauma is formed. We have a terrible incident when we're a kid or even in a past life, and the emotional energy of that is still stuck in Act 2, the middle, and that's where the climax happens, right? So if we are constantly in the climax of a terrible event that never got resolved, so it's still stuck in Act 2 in our body, then we are tasked, even if it's not our fault, we're tasked with the responsibility of escorting that Act 2 into Act 3 and providing it some resolution so that we don't have to be always exposed to this unnerving energy of incompletion, and we can bathe in the energy of completion, because that is what naturally relaxes our nervous systems, which leads to greater emotional health.
I love that you just brought in that piece around trauma, and another way to kind of complete a trauma, right, is to be in this kind of story where you're not stuck. I like the way you said it, like that you're not stuck in the middle act. you've gotten
Right.
to take it to completion, which is also the same as what we do in trauma work. It's like
Yeah.
the stuck
Yeah.
energy, we let it come out as that fight or flight, that movement that
Right.
wanted to happen that couldn't, and then
Yeah.
that can complete the energy of it,
Right.
and re-experiencing that again. So that's a really cool kind of analogy. So I have a curiosity of like, there's so many different modalities out there. What's your suggestion of kind of the people that what kinds of people might do really well coming to you? Because even what we're talking about, right, is like, we're comparing this even right now to, like the trauma work that I do or deep somatic work in the body, right? Like those are all also experiential. And then, yeah, I'm curious, who do you find really benefits from your work and what's the benefit of it, for certain
Mm-hmm.
people and certain kinds of issues? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that has actually been one of my biggest challenges, is being able to identify a
Mm-hmm.
target audience, because I typically have pretty spot on intuition, and so typically I can work with just about anybody,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they have reached a certain threshold of curiosity and willingness to feel, right? So that doesn't mean that if somebody is a little bit unwilling to feel or a little bit numb, that they're no longer eligible, but it it creates a um, it's not nearly as much effort for me to work with somebody who's curious, and
Mm-hmm.
that creates
Mm-hmm.
a much bigger opening for depth, right? Because some people are they'd rather be stuck in the way that they have already done things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. And those are, obviously not the people who are going to be interested in transformation. Um, so what's really interesting for me is determining who is a appropriate candidate for one-on-one work, who is an appropriate candidate for group work, and who is maybe more appropriate later when they have accomplished something else in their journey. And it's really a case by case basis, because some people, I was just talking about this with some guys about um, appropriate clients, and some people want to be on the same page as their spouse, for example, and if they don't have some agreement with their spouse to do this kind of work, then they might hesitate.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people might be um, doing really well in some areas of their life, and they want to uncover another area of their life,
Mm-hmm.
and well, because somebody has um, some sense of success and some sense of failure, and so they have uh, partial confidence, you could say. Um, when somebody has little to no confidence, they would be better off uh, before doing Tao play, doing a very simple, positive psychology kind of reframings, coaching before doing Tao play. Some people are not quite ready for Tao play because they need to understand that they are not a lost cause, right? If somebody feels like they're a lost cause, they are not quite ready for Tao play. That doesn't mean that they are a lost cause. It just means that they could benefit from a little bit of coaching and kind of getting on the same page first, because when somebody does Tao play, a full session that goes very deep,
Mm-hmm.
um, it can be a little bit disorienting, because suddenly our identity of lack or identity of victimhood or whatever starts to become very, very obvious and starts to dissolve and fall away. And that does leave space for empowerment, but it also, that space for empowerment also is just space. And so it can be um, interpreted as a problem. Like immediately after a session, sometimes people are drawn to go have a giant meal because they have this big empty space and they want to fill it all up. And so, really being in a helpful state of mind, frame of mind before a session makes the integration of the session much more helpful, effective, and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I would also imagine though that it's, I mean, all of that makes sense, and I would also imagine that it, you know, I imagine that some of the coaching that you do with people also, and kind of prepping them for that empty space, because it also seems like with this, I would imagine with this kind of work that you never really know what's going to kind of unfold, right? Like you're kind of in the experience of it, and so for one person it might be like, wow, I'm experiencing all this freedom. For another person, it could be that they really tapped into that one side of the polarity that they've been not looking at, and it actually brings up a lot of emotion. But what I hear you saying is that maybe the best clients for Tao play are those that are either also doing other work, like simultaneous, like other healing work simultaneous to Tao play, and then this is kind of like, this could help them to like really push through something that maybe they've been struggling with, or people who kind of already have a sense of ground and a sense of sort of curiosity and positivity around the kind of healing work that they're doing. Would you, and I'm curious, would you recommend this for someone who, we were talking before about, who has trauma, or would you say like you would want them to be working with somebody else, while they're then come to you for a session?
Yeah, good question. So technically this is a trauma healing modality, so it doesn't stop somebody from experiencing it. But what I really want to highlight is the difference between individuation and awakening. So most people, like let's say you take someone like Tony Robbins. He is famous for like get down and get dirty, that sort of grit, like just get up 5 a.m. and do it. It's just like that perspective is all about helping people achieve individuation and sort of like powering through their trauma and knowing that their willpower can make an impact. And so the individuation step, in my experience, is super helpful to get wrangled before moving into the awakening step. And what's interesting about Tao play is it is both capable of facilitating individuation and awakening in the same process. And so that means that a good facilitator can, or you could say a experienced, skilled facilitator can detect where there is individuation wanting to happen, which is the cultivation of willpower, cultivation of boundaries, cultivation of preferences, the naming of opinion in order to differentiate that person as, okay, yes, you're actually a person that exists and has a mind of your own. That is very helpful to come before awakening. And so in the Tao play process, a lot of the storytelling uses a lot of absurdity as one of the tools. And so the absurdity tools are actually what creates the individuation experience. And then so that's before it gets to completion. And then the completion aspect is the awakening experience that escorts the individuation into a place of, um, it takes it from I don't know myself to I know myself to I no longer need to know myself. And
Mm.
so it's these steps of
Mhm.
unraveling
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
slightly different for everybody depending on where we're each at. So then when I do a group experience,
Mhm.
I have to um, be really specific about what's actually happening, knowing that
Mhm.
people in the group can have a spectrum of places where they're at.
I'm curious with that though. I mean, two things come to mind for me. One is that, do you describe that process to people in your work, like the sort of individuation to
Not really.
awakening? Because
Sometimes.
it strikes me as actually that um I mean, because my other question would have been like, would be, okay, so maybe people get a taste of that in your work, but those are also skill set, right? Those are aspects of us that we have to cultivate over time. Um,
Hmm.
so it could be really interesting. I mean, it could be really interesting to kind of, name that in the work that you're doing with people, show
Hmm.
them the process that they're going through to have a
Hmm.
direct taste experience of what that's like to know the self. And then also, because you're so have that solidity and ground with self, then you can let go of the self and go beyond it. Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so it's cool.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I try not to give too many specifics, especially when I'm like gonna do a session with somebody, but I also do provide, videos like this. Oh,
Yeah,
says I've
yeah. No, you're okay.
oh, okay, I guess my charger fell out. That's why it gave me a warning. Let me just plug that back in. Um, I give a lot of information away. I have a YouTube channel and stuff like that, just for people who want to go deeper or want to become a practitioner, want to become a facilitator, either of Tao play or some kind of facilitation. And this this is a very different experience than um, the Tao play modality itself, because one is about knowing and one is about unknowing, right? So the only purpose that we can use the information for, like the information I'm providing here or the information I provide on my YouTube channel, it's information to know so that it can be applied to unknow. And so if people are just getting it to know, then it really does no good. And so that's why one of the most important things for me is also just to give away as much information as possible for free, because I know that most people are not going to apply the information. And so for the few people who actually will apply the information, um, then they're going to have access to transformation on their own. They can shift something on their own. They don't need to buy
Mm-hmm.
anything, they don't need to invest. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's a great reward that they're giving themselves by,
Mm-hmm.
applying knowledge. And then
Mm-hmm.
for the other people who maybe are afraid to apply the knowledge or don't know how to apply the knowledge, then that's where my facilitating and experience comes in, is simply because I have a sense of the terrain, and even though I don't know what's going to happen, I have experience feeling a range of emotions, and I have experience, um, you know, energetically dying, transforming in front of other people, so that I can know that even if something feels unsafe, that it is still safe in these containers. And that confidence that I bring is really the only magic that I do, is just the willingness to lay it all on the line and let the energy guide me. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny to talk about because I can't really take credit for anything, right? I'm just I'm just surrendering to the process, and that's all I
Mm.
have trained myself how to do. And in that, magic always happens.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so I'm hearing that you kind of one that like which I really appreciate about you is that you're really interested in people getting the knowledge and the healing in whatever way they can, and reaching the most people that you can, and offering that for so that people don't necessarily have to rely on you or other people, even though
Yeah.
sometimes it's great, obviously, to it can be very supportive to rely on a coach or a healer or
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do the work that you do. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm also hearing that your process that you've developed is really intuitive, and you are really sort of following your own kind of like what unfolds with the person that you're with in that particular moment or with the group. Um,
Hmm.
this might be a good time though to transition into kind of how you would support. What are some of the principles that you could share that would allow other healers and coaches to begin to use elements of your work in their work with clients to kind of add
Cool. Yeah.
to it?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the best way to answer that, I think, would be um, to kind of share a little bit about how I discovered this work and why it worked for me. One of the most important parts, as I mentioned to you before, privately, was this work came to me, or this work revealed itself because I needed something that I could do alone by myself and without the help of somebody else. And so I'm not necessarily recommending that, but this is why I developed it, and or why it revealed itself to me. And the what I was actually doing was mirror work. So I was looking in the mirror and I was having conversations with myself, and in doing so, I went to places in my thoughts and my conversation that normally I would never have a chance to go to. You know, if I'm talking to a person, then their feelings are always at stake. Their heart is vulnerable to what I say. There's a responsibility that we have to care for other people when we're, engaging with other people. And when I'm engaging with myself in the mirror, I know where I'm coming from. I know what I'm doing. I have no doubt about my intention for showing up. And so I can't hurt myself, right? I cannot be offended by whatever comes out of my mouth. So taking that container into a session of mirror work, I have the opportunity to say things that I would never normally have a chance to hear myself say. I could go on, um, I could find a part of myself that craves violence, for example, and then I can go off on a 10-minute tangent about all of the asses I want to kick, and I can go into extreme gory detail about all of the, whatever I can imagine. It's essentially like we've watched so many horror movies, we've watched so many boxing matches, and emotional abuse and all kinds of things on this planet that we have been exposed to, and to imagine that we are not impacted by these things is fiction, right? Because we are impacted. There's violence all around us, and it is so essential to be able to give ourselves opportunities to express the imprint of this violence into the world, back out into the world, so that we're no longer burdened with holding on to it. But if we're doing it unconsciously, vomiting it onto other people, that is destructive. It's proliferating more of the same issue, and it's self-destructive too. So there is such a benefit. It's almost like if you imagine like popping a zit. It's gross, but you get the relief of pressure. And that's what's happening in the Tao play process or the mirror work way that I started. It's just releasing
Mhm.
all of this ridiculous bullshit that needs to be acknowledged but doesn't actually need to be true, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I appreciate how you started out and what you're saying. I also think that you may be more unique than you realize in being able to kind of access those parts alone and feel comfortable and really expressing them and feeling them. I think a
Right,
lot of,
right.
in my experience, a lot of people like that's what people struggle with. And so think then when there's a safety with another person who's holding that space for them, and is completely just in non-judgmental, loving
Yeah.
acceptance, I think then that begins, in my experience of all the clients I've seen, that's what begins to like allow people want to go there because it's freeing,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
they often need that kind of safety there to then begin to
Yeah.
even say, oh, okay, that's okay to look at this, because so many people as children it wasn't okay and they split off those parts of themselves. So it's
Yeah.
really fascinating how you started. I do want to go back to like, how would you then take that to, um, how would you, so given all of that, how would you support healers or coaches to use your work in their work?
Yeah. So being able to recognize, that's the most important thing for me, is being able to recognize that the exposition, the revealing of, you could say, toxic energies without judgment is the medicine, right? That is the
Mm-hmm.
individuation medicine here. And, it's not touching on the awakening aspect, but individuation is essential. And so if, I want to preface it with this. A lot of well-meaning healers and coaches are attempting to correct somebody's mindset to make their mindset what they think is good, a good mindset, what it should be, right? And so that is using right, wrong, dualistic uh, perspective. It's using a it's essentially force, and force is violence. And so if we are subconsciously violent against our own mindset because it's not the right one, then it's not healing trauma, it is using trauma against us, or it's like reorienting trauma so that we can get things done and we can maybe be more successful, but the trauma hasn't left. It's still there, and we're just hating ourselves in a different way. And so the mechanics here are, if we can have faith and trust and um, give a chance for the revealing of toxic energies fully, then we actually don't need to provide the new framework for the new mindset, because the scrubbing of that aspect of the wounding creates the new mindset creates itself automatically, or I like to say automagically, because
Mm-hmm.
if we can remove the toxins, emotional, energetic toxins that are blocking a healthy mindset from automatically um, uh, forming itself, then it will form itself. We just need to give those
Mm-hmm.
energies a chance to move.
So how would you, I mean, that was beautifully said, and I relate to that in the work that I do, which I say is like getting to the emotional root and, sort of excavating it and, so to
Yeah.
speak, moving those energies. But how would you suggest with the work that you do other coaches and healers use that to shift to help their clients. Yeah.
Yeah, so like the method I use, I'm not necessarily recommending because it's strange. It takes a lot of creativity. I use like fictional components. I make up a story on the spot and then we dive into it. So that's one way to go about it, right? That's just a method to accomplish the result. But all somebody really needs to do is, what are you really angry about? If you got your way, could you what would you do if there were absolutely no consequences, right? And giving someone a chance to go deeper and deeper, expounding on the sickness of their imagination. What are the gory details that you can imagine? What is the worst case scenario? What is the if you had access to that hot person and you had all night to spend with them, what would you do with them? What would you do to them? Like giving someone full permission to explore their imagination in regards to a situation that may intimidate them or may shock them or may whatever, and just being the non-judgmental space for them to to be experienced, right? To make an impact on somebody and remain seen as innocent. If somebody can say their worst, be their worst, own their worst, and still be seen as innocent, that is the whole medicine.
Yeah, so I mean, really, I would say that this is all about you're urging coaches and healers to support clients to fully express themselves and integrate their polarities and their shadows, the parts that have maybe been like locked away, and that through that, then the mind will calm itself, because there's not then, like, the mind is usually a byproduct of these accessed parts of us inside.
Yeah. And that it's the full expression that really takes digging, because it's not natural. It is far from natural for us, and it takes like really listening deeper for what can I say that will shock myself. This is not the aspect of the healer. This is the aspect of the person who's going through the process, but the healer can encourage this. And this is where absurdity comes in, because if we can invite absurdity, then we can actually shock ourselves. We can jar ourselves from the strangeness of things that can come out of our mouths or even move through our bodies. And it's the shockingness, it's the strangeness, it's the absurdity that actually changes our sense of self and changes the energy of how we relate to who we are. Because if we can surprise ourselves, we've just broken the box that we've put ourselves into.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It seems like that we kind of had a complete look at the whole, your work and what it is, and then also sort of how others might be able to use it in their work. So thank you so much. This feels like a good place to end, I think.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and unless there's anything else you want to add before we end, anything that like is still kind of alive.
I can just share that I'm going to be doing, I'm transitioning mostly to group work, and a lot of the processes I do are healing trauma and all this stuff, but I don't call myself a healer or a coach. I really see myself as a performance artist, because I'm just trusting the process. And so now I'm preparing for this one-man show that I am going to be doing a West Coast USA tour with, and still locking in dates. So the dates are not secured yet, but if someone wants to keep up with me on announcing that. And the live experiences are something that can be taken in without participation necessary. So someone could just watch, or some people can participate. And it makes for a very interesting mix um, of energy movement. And also it's really fun for me. And that's really what's changing about my work is how can I have more fun? How can I be more engaged? How can I stop hiding? How can I be more vulnerable? How can I uh, give myself the gift of shining brighter and being more kind of strange and out there? And this is really what's next for me. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to looking at this more like a creative project, an art project that is, um, maybe has side effects of healing and side effects of, transformation, but is mostly about um, my own personal expression being trusting, my having faith that what's medicine for me is going to be medicine for someone else.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, are there other besides that? Are there other programs that you want to? This would have been my next question, like that you're offering, or ways that people can contact you or work with you that you would like to share?
Sure. So my one-man show is called Angel Beast, and this is the Angel Beast tour that I'm preparing for, and that is going to be recorded, and then all of the tour dates are going to be, it's all spontaneous, so each tour date is a very different experience, and so all of those are going to be recorded and then combined into an album. It's kind of like um, it's hard to say if it's an e-course. It's like an album, but it's laid out like an e-course. So it can also be downloaded just tracks and put on your phone for listening to. But yeah, so the Angel Beast is going to have a crowdfunding campaign coming soon, West Coast tour coming soon, and then um, later in the spring I'll be moving to Europe, and then we'll be probably touring in Europe as well.
Great. Okay.
Yeah,
So, and
thank you so
how
much.
do you want if people want to follow you? Where can they follow you on Facebook? What's the best medium to follow you?
Yeah, you tag me here on Facebook, follow me on Facebook, or add me as
Great.
a friend, and
Mhm.
then I also have a an online experience that's still in development, which is called the Truth Dojo. And
Mhm.
this is going to be going into round 2 of the Truth Dojo coming soon. And
Mhm.
that's kind of a way to do Tao play in your pocket on your own so that we can kind of
Mhm.
simplify this process and do it in a bite-sized version so people can practice the modality and be empowered without needing anyone's permission.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on the
Yeah,
show. Once
thank
again, my
you.
name
Yeah.
is Lori. Yeah. Once again, my name is Lori Beth, and obviously the sun has kind of encroached me as we've been doing the show, which
Yeah.
is amazing
Yeah, I've
because
been
I'm in
enjoying watching it.
Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Washington State, and it was probably rain. I think it was raining this morning. Um, so this show happens every Tuesday at 1 p.m. and I, interview a range of people on a range of topics. So tune in here. And I am a psychotherapist and a somatic and trauma healer, and also an embodiment and empowerment coach for women. So I have a couple of different offerings. I have trauma healing containers, which are a minimum of 3 months for both men and women. And those are just actually, I think it's pretty self explanatory, but I do really deep trauma and somatic work. And I use lots of different modalities that I've learned over the years to really connect with your nervous system and the traumas, whether they're relational traumas or incidental traumas. We basically really find our way through together. And I really attune to you and your specific needs and your specific nervous system and teach you how to rewire your nervous system as we're healing the trauma. And then I also have one-on-one containers for women. And my work is really about awakening soul power through the darkness. So I do both somatic and trauma healing there, as well as shadow work, um, and uh, and then really helping women to embody themselves more, to be in their bodies more, and through rewiring their nervous systems and through deep healing and deep body work, basically, claiming their power and who they truly are and who they truly want to be in the world. Because once we are able to, like, if we're operating from conditioning and programming, then we aren't truly free and we're not truly free to choose. And so basically, the work that I do is like the deeper work in order to, and then I combine it with coaching of like, okay, and what do you truly want and how do you make that happen in the world and in yourself, but from a place that is really coming from the depths of you and living your life on your own terms and knowing yourself. So if you're interested in working with me in that capacity, I offer 3, 6, and 9-month containers. And you can follow me on Facebook and reach out to me there. And so that's the best place to find me. So thank you so much again, Joshua. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And I will see you next week. Okay, bye.
I'll just say
Yep.
Lori really knows her stuff, and so highly recommended. She's
Oh,
awesome.
thank you
And
so
if for some reason anything that I shared is like not vibing with you or you're not ready for it, Lori is a great person to connect with. Yeah.
much. You're so funny. Thank you for that plug. And yeah, and of course Joshua's work is, I would recommend it. It's very unique, and I personally, he gave me a session, and I would actually say that I did one session with him, and I would actually say that I think it is good as a sort of addition to other kinds of work to really work with one polarity, really work with something that's kind of up for you to really like know what that kind of expressive embodied experience is, through play and through theater. It's really fun. And after I remember after our session, I all of a sudden had all this energy, kind of like you were
Oh,
talking
cool.
about. Yeah, yeah. I didn't have
Awesome.
to tell you
Awesome.
that. So
So nice to hear.
yeah. So thank you so much, and we will see you. I will see you next week. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.